G'day guys, welcome to another video. Today I'm going to talk you through how to create a questionnaire using Google Forms. Hopefully this will provide you with some knowledge on how to do so, and you can again obviously go back and rewatch this as many times as you need to in case you miss any steps. So the first thing you'll need to do is go to a Google search and type in Google Forms. Click the first link and then click this button here which says go to Google Forms. Once you have done so, you'll probably see a list of all these other forms that you've done, but if you can click blank, and what this will take you to is a fresh form here where you can start to put in some details. Now, for the sake of time, here's one I have prepared earlier. What you guys will want to do is, here you would like, where it says untitled form on your screen, I want you to put in the title of your research paper. Now what I've done here is I've just written a very generic title because for the purposes of this I haven't thought of a very specific question for you. So I'm going to use the staple gender role example which I did in a previous video. So in the title here, just writing something short and sweet about what your topic is looking at. What you then want to do is in the description field below, you want to talk about a few things. The first thing is you want to introduce your research, because when you send this link out to people to get them to fill it out, having some background information will be beneficial for them to help put your questionnaire in context. So a bit of a blurb about what your research topic is about. So what I've written here is I'm conducting a social research paper examining the differences between gender roles in the family across generations Z and X. So once you've given a little bit of an introduction about what it's about, remember to try keep it brief, is you want to say where this data is going to be used. Okay, so as part of ethical research practice in society culture, we need to make sure that participants are aware of what their data and answers are going to be used for. So here I've stated the data from this questionnaire will be used in my research report. I'm conducting this questionnaire to provide in-depth qualitative information as well as quantitative information regarding my topic. So here you've said where it's going to be used. What you then want to do is talk about the ethical research side of things to make sure that your participant feels comfortable in doing so. In doing this questionnaire, sorry. So what I find is always good to say is please answer questions truthfully and seriously, or if you don't like seriously, you could say honestly there. And this next sentence is really important to put in as well to show that you're being ethical in your research. So if at any point you find any particular question or topic too sensitive or uncomfortable, please do not feel obliged to answer the question. So what you're letting your research participants know there is that if they're uncomfortable answering any question or they don't want to, they can simply skip it and move on. And the last caveat is to make sure that you say that all responses are anonymous, which they will be, and then obviously to thank them for their time. Now, to make sure that you're actually making these responses anonymous, there's a few things I want to talk about in the settings to make sure that we fix up. So if you follow my mouse up to the right-hand corner here under settings and click that cog, what Google Form will automatically do is have this box ticked, which restricts to users at BWSC. So you definitely want to unclick that, because when you send your Google Forms out, if that's clicked, only people with an @bwsc.com email will be able to complete this questionnaire, and you want to get as many people doing that as possible. So make sure you untick that right there, like so. You definitely do not want to limit to one response, because if you do, they're required to sign into Google, and if they sign in, they have to use an email address, which removes the anonymous element of your ethical research. So make sure you leave that unticked. The next thing that just to be aware of is the presentation tab. So what you can do is, I think these two will automatically be ticked. You can just leave those. If you want to change the confirmation message, you can. The default just says your response has been recorded. If you want to add something like, thanks for your time, I really appreciate it, whatever, that's fine. Okay, or you can just leave it as is. And quizzes, you should have that turned off. Okay, so once you've done that, make sure you click save, otherwise it's going to revert back to normal. One thing I will point out as well is in this section here, you shouldn't be mentioning your name, your school, or any personal information that might give the person. I mean, obviously they're probably going to know who you are anyway as you're doing the questionnaire, but there's no need to say what school you're from, you know, that you're doing it for. I mean, you can mention that you're doing it for society and culture if you want, but you don't need to. Okay, the shorter and briefer this is, the better. So after you've done that, there are a few staple questions that you want to ask no matter what your topic is. And the first one is, what is your age range? Okay, so when you get to the question, you'll notice as well, I have numbered my questions. So Google Forms won't automatically number this. So if I go to add another question here, it's not going to number it for me. So make sure you number your questions. One, it just looks better, and it lets the respondents know what question they're up to. And when you actually go to print it out with some more data, which we'll get to later, it's easy for you to sort and navigate. So when you do go to create a question, there are very different types and styles of questions that you can do. So ranging from short answer to a paragraph, multiple choice, which means I can only pick one out of certain options. Check boxes means that they can tick as many as they like out of the options. A drop down is similar to multiple choice where you can only pick one, but as opposed to having lots of different multiple choice down, if you have a drop down, there's a button here called preview, and if you click that, it'll show you what your questionnaire will look like to other people. So see here how this drop down, I've got 9 options here. If I had this as a multiple choice and I hit preview, it's quite large and long and doesn't look as nice. So what I like to do is make that a drop down, because then it's nice and easy here, and it doesn't make because the last thing you want to do is make the questionnaire look so big that as soon as someone opens it, if they can only see question 1 on the title page, they might go, oh, this is going to take forever, I'm just not going to bother, and they might close straight out of it. So that's just a little tip there. You can change up your types of responses here. A linear scale is on a range of 1 to 5. How much do you agree or disagree with the following sort of statements? So if I quickly just make a linear scale, I'll show you what this looks like. I'll just write question, disagree and agree. If I go to preview that, this is what it will look like. Okay, so that's where you write, you know, on a scale of 1 to 5, how much do you agree with the following statement? And then you might make a statement, and then people can tick whether they strongly disagree or strongly agree, and that sort of thing. So that's what a linear scale question looks like. A multiple choice grid box and checkbox grid, they take about a minute or 2 to set up. So if you're wanting to pursue that, check in with your teacher and they can show you how to do that. But that's really good to use if you're wanting people to talk about, say you want to make like a little table of, say we're looking at gender roles and norms here. You might have the mother and the father as a column, and then you might have lots of different stereotypical characteristics, and the respondent has to choose whether they think that characteristic belongs to the role of the mother or the father. So something like that if you're wanting a bit more of a complex question, but again, check with your teacher whether or not that'll be appropriate for you. So they're the types of questions. To add a question, you simply, the first one will already appear. If you click on it, you'll see this little tab come up, and you just hit add question, and it will add a question just below the one that's highlighted in the blue side there. If you ever want to delete a question, there's a little delete button here, and you just delete that. You'll notice to the right hand side here, there is a turn toggle for required. That means if you turn that on to required, that the person cannot submit their questionnaire without having done that question. We want to make sure that these are all turned off, just because in here we've said if at any point you feel uncomfortable with a particular question, that you can skip it, okay? And if we make a question required, we're not really giving them that option. The types of questions, back to the types of questions that you'll need to have no matter what your topic is. The first one is your age range. Now what you'll note is I've got a few different age ranges here. The reason being that when you are younger, the difference, say, between a 12-year-old's opinion and a 16-year-old's opinion and the level of maturity between the two, say, for example, one might be in primary school, the other might be in year 10, the maturity gap is pretty significant there. Whereas if you look at someone who's, say, and that's only a span of 4 years, but if you look at someone who, say, is 30 to 34 or 35, there's not going to be too much of a difference between their maturity level and life experience there. But there definitely is a much bigger gap the younger you are. And so that's why the certain age ranges from 1 to 4 are a lot shorter. And that's because maturity gaps increase and you go through a lot of different socialization life stages which make you more mature and whatnot. So that's why we have shorter age ranges there. And then you'll see it goes up in almost groups of decades there. The reason being, if you just wrote 30 to 49, again, a 30-year-old's opinion and a 49-year-old's opinion are going to be very different. Whereas if you look at a 41-year-old's opinion and a 47-year-old, they might be fairly similar there, okay? And then we increase the age gap around 50 to 64 and then 65 plus. Now, what you also must have in this question is a prefer not to say. Again, the idea here is if at any point someone's too uncomfortable, that they have a box that they can tick. Yes, they could technically leave it blank and not answer it, but having the option physically there for them is better than not having it at all. So make sure you have that. Now, most people will generally be comfortable enough to select an age. Another staple question that you want to have is which gender do you identify as? So that wording's really important there to have as well. What we make this is a multiple choice question, okay? So most people will either pick male or female as their identification. If someone, again, doesn't want to say, you have the prefer not to say. And then what you've done here is you've created an other box, okay? So how you do that is, if I was to, I've already done it here for you, but I'll delete it. So you won't type here. If you click the multiple choice button and write other, what ends up showing here is that it's an actual option, okay? And they don't actually get to type in what other means for them. Whereas if you see that little blue thing, link, where it says add other, if you click that, it'll enter it for you. And what that will then look like for the person is that if they click that, they can then type in whatever other gender that they want to write there. Okay, so that's really important to note as well, that if you hit that blue box, add other, as opposed to typing it in and saying other. Okay, so make sure you have that. The other really key thing that you'll need for this assignment in particular is which generation do you belong to. So you're only going to list the 2 generations that you're looking at. There is no point listing every single generation here because you're only comparing 2 generations. Okay, so don't list every single generation there because then you're just going to get data that you can't use and it's going to be annoying for you to sift through. So only put the 2 that are relevant to you and include the year bracket, because the reason being that your participants and respondents might not actually know what generation that they fall into. They might know they're Gen X, but it's good to have it there in brackets so that they know that they're selecting the right option. Okay, so make sure that's there. Again, leave a prefer not to say button there as well. So they're sort of the 3 really key ones that you want to have. The reason being is that when you go through your responses, you can separate them, and I've just done a quick one here for you. What Google will do is generate them into graphs and stuff for you, which is really handy. And what you can actually do is on the right hand side, you can click copy chart, and then on your Google Doc, you can paste that in. So say this is your research report, you can actually paste that image straight in and refer to it. So that's really handy to know as well. But what I was saying, the reason that we want to have these 3 sorts of questions is that when you go through your data, it's really handy to note you can separate responses by generation type, you can separate them by gender. So the idea here is that you can notice all the different trends. Say everyone from Generation Z has agreed with question 10, or only half of them have said no, or whatever it is. It's really good to have those because then you can identify trends in your data based off what Gen Z people say, versus Gen X, versus what males and females say, versus what young people versus older people say. So it's really good to have those questions and base ones in there. Now, other sort of key questions you want to have towards the start, and you'll notice that we're starting with more closed-ended questions first. That's a really good plan, because if you just start with question 1, a really big open-ended question, people aren't warmed up to that sort of question, if you catch my drift. So if you open a questionnaire and it's some really deep question that they've got to really think critically about, and it's question 1, they might again feel overwhelmed and close your questionnaire. So you want to start with some closed-ended questions and then move into your open-ended questions, and save your biggest kind of juiciest questions to at least about halfway, and then go from there. Some other key questions that you want to make sure you have towards the start are generally some more closed-ended ones which are related to your topic. So what I've done here is I've just written a few base ones depending on what you want to pick. Now obviously you're not going to have all of these questions in, it depends on your topic. So say for example you've chosen a topic such as sexuality, you would obviously want to have a question identifying and asking what the participant's sexuality is, okay, because then you can draw data from there. Same if you're going to look at beliefs, okay, let's say you're going to look at the influence of religion between 2 different generations. You would want to ask which religion the participants follow, and you can list sort of the main ones there, okay. So you want to make sure that you've got different things like that. Again, I've got what ethnicity do you identify as if you're looking at something like ethnicity and culture. What is your occupation if you're looking at something like the workplace, or if you're really looking to compare 2 different occupations, you can list which 2 different occupations they are. So you want to really have those sorts of questions in, because then when you go to your responses, you'll be able to differentiate between them. In terms of number of questions you should have, 10 to 15 is the sweet spot. You want a minimum of 10 to make it worthwhile to get a lot of data, but you probably don't want more than 15, because then people are going to start to get annoyed and bored, and maybe the questionnaire is probably taking too long for them to finish, and they might get annoyed and just submit what they have already, or they might just cross out of it altogether, and then you've lost all this good data that you could have had. So 10 to 15 is a really good sweet spot to have. If you do end up wanting to ask, say, like 20, 25 questions, my advice to you would be to create 2 separate questionnaires, okay? So have one questionnaire with all your main data, and then your second questionnaire might be a follow-up if people want to add more, okay? So have them into separate questionnaires if that's you. The other thing you want to do is base your questions off the research scaffold that you have or should have completed by now. So that's when you have listed all your focus questions. So let's say with gender roles between the family, okay, if your sub-focus question was define gender roles between different generations, okay, one of your questions here might be, in your opinion, what is the role of the mother within a family? In your opinion, what's the role of a father in the family? Okay, so you're using your focus questions to guide the types of questions that you're going to ask in your questionnaire. The reason being, again, that if you base it off all your focus questions, when you go to write your research report, you're going to have primary research data that you can pull throughout your whole essay. If you just write random questions in here, you end up writing your essay and you're going, oh, I'm not actually using any of this data because I'm not actually talking about that. So it's really important that you have that focus question scaffold done, and that those focus questions are reflected in your questionnaire questions, so that you can have primary research that you can reference throughout your entire research report. So that's really important. The other thing, some sort of housekeeping things, is to make sure there's no typos here. Always start with a capital letter. Don't have a lowercase letter like that. It just looks tacky. So make sure you've got capital letter. Make sure you actually have a question mark at the end. You don't just want to have a question there. Make sure it's got a question mark. Another annoying thing is do not capitalize all your letters like this, because it's grammatically incorrect and it looks, again, tacky and silly. So make sure you're adhering to proper grammatical conventions. The other thing and suggested thing you can do if you want, you can customize your theme a bit. If you don't like purple, you can pick red or orange or whatever you like, really. You can choose an image header if you want to make it a bit more relevant to your topic, and all that sort of stuff, but that's fine. You can even change the font style, but I would probably stick to basic. You don't want decorative because I can't even read half those words, so just keep it to basic because it's nice and easy to read. The other thing, I've already talked about the preview function, but once you've written your questionnaire, maybe answer it yourself to make sure that there's no hiccups, and obviously that'll be really good because it'll give you one response, but you should answer it yourself before you send it out to other people. That leads me to the last point. How do I send it out to people? So click this at the top right hand side of your screen, the send button there. When you click there, you'll see these options come up. The best and easiest way is where it says send via, click this little paperclip looking thing here, and you'll get a link here. Now what you can do as well is click this button to shorten the URL, and then it's done. You can either use the keyboard shortcut, which is Control+C to copy, or you can simply hit copy here. Once you do that, let's just pretend I've logged on to my, social media account. You can then paste that link in there. People can then click that, and it will take them straight to your questionnaire where they can fill it out. Okay, so that's how you send it out to people. You can put that link everywhere, put it in your bio or whatever, and get some responses there. Get your parents to put it on their Facebook and get all their friends to do it, etc. Put it on Google Classroom for your classmates to do it. Okay, I think that's pretty much everything. If you have a question that hasn't been covered in this video, obviously ask your teacher. Apart from that, happy questionnaire. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.